So the government had the good grace to let us watch the rugby last night. Didn't interrupt Strictly Comes Dancing, but then they threw that, I wouldn't quite call it a unexpected thing. We were all being briefed about what was likely to happen. And then we know that with effect from this coming week, we in England are going to be experiencing a lockdown. It's a lockdown with different variations. It's not my intention to go through all those different nuances of rules here, but what we did last night, we had an announcement on new financial support that was going to be extended to help businesses. There is some silence in terms of the self-employed, what's likely to happen there. So I'm going to make an educated guess about what I think is going on. There's also some additional grant funding that's being provided to help businesses across the sector, across the piece here. So what I'm going to attempt to do tonight, based on the information that I can glean, it's going to be my specialist topic on Mastermind one day, but what I can actually glean, figure out about what's going on in terms of financial support for your businesses. I'm going to share that with you tonight. I'm also going to share some thoughts about how we deal with this washing machine cycle of change every single minute, it seems. I will point out to you as a health warning here, by the time I finish this broadcast tonight, which will last for about 20 minutes to half an hour, it's likely there'll be new details, new rules coming out. If so, I shall update you on that accordingly. So hi folks, my name is Mahmood. Some of you will be used to seeing me pop up on your broadcast screens. So I'm just going to borrow about half an hour of your time on this wonderful Sunday evening. I'm sure there are probably more exciting things to worry about, but I think certainly if you're a business here, there's a lot of things going through your mindset at the moment. Number one, this is an anxious time. So I've been in business for about 25 plus years here, helping businesses of different shapes, different sizes, from solopreneurs to large multinational companies, with all manner of things of mindset, making profits and money. And I would say, yes, I have seen turbulent times in recessions before. I have seen sort of proverbially shit hit the fan on a few occasions here, but I don't think in the last few months I've seen anything as turbulent and changing that can have an impact on not only the numbers, not only your businesses, but in terms of our mindset, our approach, and effectively, you know, it can be quite a disturbing thing there as well. I'm sure if we cast our minds back, going right back to the beginning of March, when COVID hit the screens in terms of businesses, financial support was being offered, most of us, myself included, thought by the time we get to about September, October, that would have been done and dusted. We can get back to, I hasten to use the word normal, but some degree of normality itself. So having said that, not only am I going to share some numbers with you, not only going to share some rules with you, which I think are important. Critically, it's about what do we do when we're armed with that information? What do we need to keep our businesses moving forward? What do we need to do to make sure our businesses survive the rest of this year? So don't write this year off, please. We're on the 1st of November, I believe. Yes, he says, quickly checking the time. So the 1st of November, do not write the year off. I know it's been rocky. It's been positive for some, by the way, perversely. Do not write the year off. Do not actually hide under your duvet. Do not go into a bunker. You need to do exactly what I've seen lots of my clients and non-clients doing. You need to stay strong. You need to stay positive, and you need to have a plan that undermines that or underpins it. My apologies if I'm going to have sloppy words coming out here. It's been a long day. I've been digesting lots of government policy documents. What I can see, it's very thin on the ground in terms of detail, but since I have that detail, I think Rishi Sunak is going to email me directly. I shall blend that and pass that over all of you to have a look. So before we dive into tonight's broadcast, I'm just going to say hello to a couple of people who always support me on these things. So Richard, good evening. Richard, I would say, is somebody I know as a client, as a friend, very positive mindset. So even though business may be shaping rocky, we can have a lot to learn from Richard's approach to all things here. Richard, I'm absolutely marvellous, loving doing my mastermind slot on furloughing coronavirus support. And I'm going to introduce you to my business partner on the Business Growth Club. And that's going to be one of my action points I'm going to mention towards the end of it. So Joe, my pleasure, absolutely here. Joe, fantastic person for what she does, we partner up doing something called the Business Growth Club. That's not the topic of tonight's broadcast, by the way, but I'm just going to flag that up because for me, even though we have got rocky times ahead, you mustn't, unless your business is absolutely devastated, unless it's literally you've lost all your clients, all your customers, unless you think, do you know what, I've just had enough of this, I cannot be going on anymore, and I just need to get out of this entrepreneurial, this business environment, then you have opportunities and options. I'm not saying they're easy. I'm not saying it's you can click your fingers and you can get into it straight away, but entrepreneurs and business people have got a completely different mindset to everybody else here. So you can dig deep, stay positive, access that support, and we can get through this really crappy time that's ahead of us. So what are we going to cover in terms of detail? So the thing that we know most about is the furlough scheme. Now I'm just going to bring up a couple of things here to show me. Let's make sure I get the right one. This isn't quite Netflix, everybody, by the way. So the way I would look at it, if you imagine really a great book that's got a tatty cover, but the actual book itself is brilliant, that's the way that I would actually look at what I'm doing tonight. So it's a tatty cover in terms of the slickness of the show, but hopefully it's the content that's really what we're after. So repeating what I said at the beginning, I make no shame and I have no embarrassment for repeating this here, is absolutely critical when you're faced with a crap storm, when you're faced with things changing by the minute. As I said, it's quite likely by the time we've done this broadcast tonight, it's quite likely by tomorrow morning when the more detail is published, it may be slightly different to what I told you tonight. So this is best information that I'm giving you here. Your mindset, again, it's not saying you can't, start thinking, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? But take control. You need to have I would suggest a strong money mindset. You need to have right, let's roll our sleeves up. To help you have that good mindset, to help you navigate through here, underpinning it is not only the action, but you need to put together a plan. So for me, calm, panic and anxiety will not help you in your decision making. You need to be as rational as you can. You need to make sure you look after yourself. So if you are feeling quite stressed out, if you are feeling overwhelmed by everything, make sure A, you're sleeping correctly, B, take a few moments to get away from the business. Look after yourself. You're the most important asset in your business, but you need to grab it by the scruff. You need to take control of what's going on. As I said, pandemonium, panic has happened for lots of us in business. I've seen quite a lot of it over the 25 plus years that I've been in business. It's not going to stop. And I'm not saying it's something that we encourage, but it's something that we can actually deal with. Business story. So when we've gone through some of the numbers that we're looking at tonight, for me, it's important that you write out and you develop your business story. So think about short-term time frame if you want. I would say typically for me, I would think in a minimum of 6 months to a year ahead. So from today up until ideally next October, if you think that's too far ahead of you to even think about, I think there were two things that come from that. Number one, I can sympathize, but if you don't think about your business further forward than a few weeks and a few months, you've got a very unstable business, I would suggest. You need to plan ahead. You need to think about what the story is going to look like in terms of customer activity, what new products you're looking to bring on. Does this landscape bring opportunities? Does it make more stress? And what I've seen from lots of people, not just my own clients, by the way, who are brilliant, but I've seen lots of innovation, lots of initiatives being executed. People are bringing things forward they might have been delaying. And really, you need to think about that business story. Numbers, I'm not going to lie to you. If you make any decisions without numbers to back you up, if you don't know what's going on in your business in terms of financially, if you don't know what the costs are, what your cash flow is going to look like, you've got a very, very difficult time ahead of you. So numbers are going to help you inform the decisions. And action. Inaction is no good to anybody. You need to actually take some action. And please don't interpret this as me hectoring anyone, by the way. I have great sympathy. I've got clients that cross the spectrum in terms of small, large size. I've got clients that get anxious, worry. I myself, I sometimes look at my own businesses and thinking, okay, what's the challenges coming up? It's the path that we've all chosen, but ultimately we are the leaders of our business. We've got to take action and we're going to do things with that. I'm just going to say hello again. Steve, good evening to you. Just pop on here. Steve, I'm just going to say hello to Steve. I know it's going to probably get in the way of the broadcast, but we are Sunday evening, so we can be a bit relaxed, and hopefully we can get this all wrapped up and we can go and find out who's got through on Strictly Comes Dancing. So obviously that's my little giveaway, my little guilty secret. All right, let's crack on. So what do we know? So let me talk about the furlough scheme, because this is the thing that so far that's been published that's got more detail. Self-employed, I'm going to comment on later on. The policy documents, the information on the self-employed, those are people who do not operate through their companies, is quite scant. It's not really changed in the last few weeks here, but I'll sit my neck out and I'll give you a few thoughts about what I think may happen, but I'll also tell you what we actually do know in terms of factual information. So let's have a look at the furlough scheme. Up to last week, we were all expecting to kick into what's called the job support scheme. Okay, and that's effectively where you had two variations, that where you had one scheme whereby the employer, if the employee had to work at least 20% of hours to be entitled to the job support scheme, the employer stepped in, paid 5% of those unpaid hours, and the government would pay 61.67% of those unpaid hours. It's a peculiar percentage, by the way, because the two numbers together gives you 2/3. That scheme is now being deferred. I would say it's likely, but not guaranteed, to kick in round about December onwards here. But watch this space, because we are in a fast moving environment, and I think political pressure and pressure groups, etc., will influence the decision making that's going forward. But as of now, the job support scheme has been not so much kicked into the long grass, but deferred and delayed. So we're now back with the furlough scheme. Now, the good thing is the furlough scheme, based on what it's been announced, mirrors the furlough scheme as it was in August 2020. So what does that mean? So it's largely the same eligibility conditions, which I'm going to go through in a moment. It's largely the same methodology of the calculations. It's where you, as the employer, will be funding the national insurance and pension contributions, but the government will provide 80% of, I'm going to call it regular wages, for an individual up to a cap of £2,500. Later on in this broadcast, I've got some numbers to share with you, by the way, just so we can see some illustrations of what's going on. So the furlough scheme is as it implies. It's pretty much going to be the same conditions. So somebody has got to be on your book, so to speak, and you've got to submit something called an RTI. Now, an RTI is what's called real-time information. So, i.e., somebody's on your payroll as a PAYE employee. They can be 0 hours contract, they can be part-time, they can be full-time, they can be a fixed contract, makes no odds. And remember, it also covers you. If you're the director employee of your company and you pay yourself a wage through PAYE, you're counted in that furlough scheme as well. Effectively, you've got to have submitted what's called an RTI claim by effectively the 29th of October. So anyone who's you've taken on after that date will not be part of the scheme. The good news, by the way, if you've not claimed under the previous furlough schemes, because maybe your employees joined after effectively March, April 2020, it makes no odds. It's all fair game. All you've got to do, even if you haven't claimed under the previous furlough scheme, you can claim under this one as long as you're on the payroll and an RTI claim has been submitted by the due dates. Part-time, fixed contract, 0 hours, yourself as well. Key thing is you've got to be submitting a payroll return. If you merely draw down dividends, you won't be able to claim under the furlough scheme. It's going to be a similar pattern. So the government has suggested so far that it doesn't matter what your working pattern is. So it could be a day off, day on. If you've got a team of people who are working for you, then you need to think carefully about how you're going to rotate those staff. There are some conditions I'm going to mention in a few moments. So the broad brush is, so you can have one off, one on. You could say 2 days off, 2 days on. It's entirely up to you. There's no suggestion at the moment from the government that they're going to be very prescriptive about that. When you submit the claims, by the way, the minimum period is 7 consecutive days. So it suggests that you can make claims in those cycles of 1 week. How often you do them depends on how geared up you are. It depends on the cash flow situation. What I would say, though, by the way, the portal has not been constructed. There's no physical claim system at the moment. They're going to modify what we've got already. And I would say my hat goes off, actually, believe it. And I know bureaucracy doesn't get a lot of thanks, but I would suggest HMRC and also local authorities, who I'm going to mention later on in this broadcast, deserve a big pat on the back here, responding very quickly to a fast-moving environment. So if you are communicating with HMRC for whatever reason, then, you know, have some degree of patience. They're doing a great job, you know, when policies are changing all the time. I would suggest, based on what I've read so far, it's likely the first claims will go live around about the first week of December 2020. So you've got a 4-week gap there before you can make your first claim. It may be brought forward, but I would suggest, in planning purposes, I would structure in a first week of December is the earliest time you can make the claim. Typically give it a 5 or 6 day turnaround. So I would budget in, I would pencil in, the earliest time that you'll get the money coming back is mid-December 2020. It may be earlier, but I suggest, as a planning assumption, do that. Now, key thing, conditions. You cannot just impose furlough on somebody. You've got to go through the processes. You've got to make sure you consulted staff. You've got to make sure they agree to that cut in hours. You've got to make sure there are letters on file. And earlier in October, HMRC started some compliance activity where, according to their estimates, there's about £3.5 billion of the £40 billion that's been paid out that's been, shall we say, incorrectly claimed. They are going to be much more aggressive. They've got information now from the earlier furlough claims. So please make sure you go through the consultation process. Make sure you've got evidence of the hours actually worked. Make sure you've got records of the hours they're supposed to work. So that fits in with what I call part-time furloughing. Make sure those letters are sent. Make sure those letters come back. If you've got any gaps and you haven't quite gone through that compliance activity, by all means, talk to your accountant. If your accountant can't help you out, then obviously drop us a line and I'm sure we can arrange something to help you guys out. What I would also say, by the way, I've updated the guidance on our own website. So since around about March 2020, we've been updating and trying to keep people in the loop about what's going on with coronavirus and the economic impact and the financial support there. So I've updated our own website with information about coronavirus, furlough claims, job support scheme, you name it, it's all there. And the guidance has been updated to reflect what we know around for December claims and the November scheme. So that's the key thing. The cap is 2,500. That's a month, by the way. Obviously, weekly is effectively, it's going to be about 500 odd quid. This is fixed predominantly, by the way, for what they call basic rate taxpayers. So remember, as we said, flexible furlough is allowed. There we go. Flexible furlough is allowed. That's so you can have, say, okay, if somebody typically works 160 odd hours in a month, you might say 80 hours on, 80 hours off. What that means is you will pro-rata the claim. Again, I've got some numbers to show you that as well. What I've lacked here, by the way, everyone, in my excitement, what I forgot to do was actually bring up the slideshow. So let's recap what we've got so far. So we talked about mindset and approach to all of this. We talked about your business story. We talked about the numbers that you need, and we talked about action. We talked about an overview of the furlough scheme, and I would suggest have a look at August 2020. The furlough scheme for November 20 is a snapshot of the August 2020 claim. You're allowed flexible furlough. There's no minimum number of hours you've got to work, as there was under the job support scheme. You must keep a record of the hours usually worked and the actual hours. And it said it's a minimum 7-day claim that you've got to submit. So you can't submit a claim for a 3-day period. It's going to be at least a 7-day period. The calculations for regular wages, by the way, is in the article on the website, but predominantly based on how it was done for the earlier furlough schemes, it will be by reference to either an average, if somebody gets a fluctuating wage, it will be the fixed salary, which includes normal regular overtime, or if that information is missing because they've started partway in the year, then you'll tend to go to look at last year's information as a benchmark. Because we don't actually know what that is at the moment, I will suggest for planning purposes, look at what the normal contracted salary is and use that as a basis to work out what the furlough claims are and feed that into your cash flow. That's here. Now it's interesting. What's interesting for me, certainly, is in terms of looking at the job retention bonus, which I'm going to mention now. Let's just take this out of the stream for a second. Let's talk about the job retention bonus. Now, I think last time I spoke about this, which was probably a few days ago, the job retention bonus is saying that if you continuously employ somebody between the 1st of November and effectively the end of January, 5th of February 2021, if you want to be exact, and you pay them at least 1,560 over that cycle, brackets 520 per month, then you get £1,000 for each employee in around about February 2021, you can make the claim. The variation on that was saying, because there were some businesses that had to be locked down in that lockdown territory, obviously they wouldn't be able to pay their employees, but it said if you're claiming under the job support scheme, then you are eligible for the job retention bonus. So my reading of it would be, if you're in furlough for November, if it then goes on to December and January, they changed it slightly, unless they move the dates forward of the job retention bonus, I would say they're going to have to work something out that there's a bonus that's going to come still around about February. They may play around with the dates, by the way, but largely there is still a job retention bonus on the table. So again, build it into your planning assumptions. Sacking and making staff redundant is what this whole scheme is about. It's trying to make sure you don't make staff redundant, keeping staff employed. And from a commercial business point of view, where we can, we want to retain staff because they are going to be a valuable asset when things start to turn around. We may have business opportunities coming up. We may be pivoting. We may be developing a new market. We may see an opening somewhere else. All those things that can happen, you need to make sure you've got those skills and expertises you can tap into. So where possible, you need to see if you can make it work by retaining your staff. What I'm going to do next is back onto the stream. Let me look at some numbers for you. So here's how it looks. And what I've done, I've just mocked up a comparison, by the way, for what it would look like if we had the job support scheme here, which is with a 20% minimum, or saying, actually, we're not going to have a complete shutdown because we may get staff who can work at home. We may not be open for business in terms of front-facing, customer-facing, but actually there are things that we can do. We might want to develop people's skills. We might wish to move more to the online aspect of our business. So therefore, we need staff to work at home. Now, here's the two comparisons. If your member of staff is on £1,500 a month, or yourself, then if you don't work any hours under furlough, then you'll get a grant of £1,200. That's the 80% of the £1,500. You will be eligible to pay the national insurance and pension contributions, and I've worked out that's about £86 on a £1,500 regular wage. Okay, and that's obviously the 86 that's levied on the furlough grant. If your employee works 20% of the time, or you work 20% of those regular hours, the grant you'll receive gets prorated downwards, as you'd imagine, to 960. The related employer's NIC contribution on that is £44. If we go to the other end of the spectrum, a higher wage at say £3,000 a month, then no hours worked, your furlough grant is £2,400, and the related employer's national insurance and pension is £287. You work some hours, you've got to pay them for those hours. That's £1,800 and £186 worth of national insurance and pension contributions. This information is published on the website. So if you go into the news section of proactiveresolutions.com, go into the news section, put in, I believe it's furlough or something really exciting like that. There's quite a lot of articles on there, and there's some illustrations for what the furlough scheme actually is showing in numbers as well as description. So that deals with furlough. Let's move on now, and let's have a look at the self-employed. I would repeat here, by the way, when I use the context term self-employed in this respect, we're not talking about business people who say we're self-employed. So I run business for a company as well as self-employed, and I would use the description, generally speaking, when I speak to somebody, yes, I'm self-employed, but effectively, we're talking in this context, somebody who fills the self-employed section of their tax return, somebody who's a sole trader or freelancer. This is what we're referring to. Unfortunately, nothing's changed at the moment. We talk about the job retention bonus. So self-employed, the overview is suggestions exactly the same as it is. So you've got to be in business in 1819. It's unfair, I would accept, that if you started trading after 1819, it's unfair because you've been missed out for the time being. It may change. What I would say from a practical point of view, from HMRC's perspective and the government, is because 1920 people, most of them would not have submitted tax returns in. So it requires a bit of information from HMRC. This is purely a personal opinion. There's nothing suggesting it will change, but on the grounds that we are getting more and more 1920 tax returns in, it may be an influencing factor, but for the time being, you've got to have been registered for self-employment 1819. Usual thing, you've got to have self-employed income below £50,000. You've got to have at least 50% of your income from self-employment. You've got to continue to trade in 1920 and intend to trade in 2021. So you've got to have those conditions there. You need evidence to back up the adverse conditions for the earlier grants, as we know. Now, what you'll get in terms of financial payout, based on what we know so far, is whatever your average monthly profits are. For each month of those average monthly profits, up to 3 months, you'll get 40% of them. So if somebody's got £2,000 a month average profits, then you will be entitled to 40% of that, i.e. 800 quid, a maximum grant of 2,400. We don't know what's going to happen for the next 3 months. We only know what's going to happen for November, December and January. Again, the portal is not open for that as of yet. But again, if you're self-employed, factor that in. Now, these are things here. Now, these are not grants. These are not where you get additional funding as such. But these are schemes that are open where you can delay and defer any liabilities that you have to HMRC. For me, when I'm doing I'm in a bit of a situation, I want to see what's going on in my business, you must do a cash flow forecast. And you've got to think about your obligations coming up and what can you delay that smooths out the cash flow? What can you afford to pay right now? And these are ones that you can actually defer. VAT, if you've had VAT that you've deferred from earlier this year, you can pay that back interest-free over 11 instalments, which is obviously going to be good news. No interest charge. Again, remember, it's debt, so all you're doing is delaying it. But again, if it helps the pressure on the cash flow, then you can elect to defer and brackets pay that over 11 instalments. Personal tax, irrespective whether you deferred anything last July, if your tax bills by January 2021 are such that you can't afford to pay them, the payments on account become problematic as well, then you can elect to pay that in instalments. You will be charged interest. I would suggest the interest rate looks around about 2.6% per annum, which is quite healthy compared to other forms of credit. Now, there are other grants here. There is something called a local restriction rates, a local restriction support grant. It's a real mouthful, that one. What that says is two things. It breaks into two categories. If your business has been forced to be locked down, which it will now under the new regulations, then depending on the rateable value of that building, so if it's below £51,000 and you're in that rates category, you will get effectively £1,000 for every 3 weeks that your business is closed. So if your business is now being forced to close because of coronavirus in a lockdown period in England, for each 3 weeks, you'll get £1,000. Now, the government haven't said what's going to happen to that 4th week, by the way. So whether that's prorated, what it's reading at the moment is every 3 weeks. So I would budget in just for getting £1,000 for that closure period. If your rateable value is larger, over 51,000, you'll get £1,500 for every 3 weeks that you're closed. If you're closed beyond 3 weeks, you'll get another £1,000 for the extra 3 weeks after that. So if you're closed for 6 weeks, that's £2,000. If it's below 51,000 rateable value, if it's 6 weeks over 51,000 rateable value, that's obviously £3,000 you'll get. Now that's half of it. There is another grant which is called discretionary, and this one is administered like the the rates-based one by the local authority. So you need to check out, wherever you live in the country, check out your local authority's website and look out for the local restriction discretionary grant. Now the discretionary grant is up to £1,500 payable by the local authority to a business that may not be a rates payer, but their business has been forced to be closed down. So if you're not in that category, then potentially there's a discretionary grant that's got your name on it. Again, it's administered by the local authorities, so you need to check your own local authority for the conditions and the criteria they establish for distributing that grant outwards. But, you know, it's another opportunity, it's another thing to explore. Mortgage holidays were meant to come to an end today, or yesterday, I should say. With effect from today, the mortgage holidays have been reinstated. You need to speak to your individual brokers. So if you've got a personal mortgage and you've got pressures on you financially to service that mortgage, then have the conversation with them sooner rather than later. Remember, the mortgage is not going to be eliminated. It's merely going to be rolled up in future payments. But for me, the name of the game is always, not just in coronavirus times, but in any circumstance, is cash flow. And universal credit. Again, if your personal finances are under a squeeze, you're not going to get furlough, self-employed income is suffering, please do not stand on ceremony, do not be too proud, and you need to make sure that you kick in and actually get that universal credit claim. The worst thing that can happen is you don't get anything. Check out the universal credit site on hmrc.gov to see what, if anything, you can claim. All right, what do we do, folks? So that's pretty much a roundup here. We'll give you some points of action here. What next? Well, for me, the what next, I can show the ticker tape, is that you must, well, I keep saying must, you don't have to listen to me at all, calm. Calmness, centering yourself, bit of deep breathing is really critical to any decision-making process. If you're overall, if you're anxious, I promise you, by the way, putting a plan together can be quite cathartic. Putting a plan together is calming. Putting a plan together, what you're going to do, translating into numbers as well as story, can really, really be a powerful ally and really, really wonderful to actually calm any of that anxiety. If you're too afraid to look at your numbers, if you're too scared to tackle what's going on in your business, if you're overwhelmed by all the noise that's going on, think carefully about what you can do to step away from that turbulence, what you can do to step away from that anxiety, what you can do to step away from that worry. Take advice and heed from those who may be in a similar position to you, from your peers, from your advisors. We are helping lots of our clients to keep them calm. Lots of our clients are calm anyway. But again, if you're close to your family and friends, they may not understand what your business is about. They may not be the best people to advise you. You do need their support, obviously, but you need to remain calm as possible. Calmness, not necessarily emotionally based decision making, is really critical, and that's going to be your real good friend. Put a plan together. Do a cash flow and take action depending on what it says. Now, just in terms of action, let me just share a few things with you. If you get an opportunity, catch up on Tuesday at 6 o'clock, where I will be broadcasting with my friend and partner, Dr. Joe North, on the Business Growth Club. We are dealing with businesses that have been going through changes, going through pivots, new products, new marketplaces. We're going to share some good content with you. We've got some great previous broadcasts to look at. I have a free webinar coming up. It was going to be on the 17th of November. So it's going to be on the 17th of November. It's a cash flow workshop webinar. I'm going to share a free cash flow template for everybody and a bit of a guide to do your cash flow. Now, it was going to be on the 17th of November. What I'm going to do, I'm going to check my diary and I'm going to bring that forward slightly. So that's going to be held, if I come back a week, where are we today? So we're on the 7th, 8th, 9th. I should count on my fingers. Isn't that really magnificent? So that's on the 9th of November. I'm going to bring the workshop forward. It's free. It's about an hour. So I'm going to talk to you about cash flow. I'm going to share a free, you think, say, an accountant would say that, a free cash flow template to share. I'm going to talk to you about what you need to do. So I'd love it if you could join me on that webinar. Sarah, that's really appreciated. Thank you very much for your help. Sarah Price, I'm just going to say she's I don't know if you say alumni, a previous member of the Growth Club. Great story. Great inspirational leader. Sarah's got a business that's like all other business here, is going through that turbulence, that change. She's facing it head on. It's not easy. It's not easy for any of us here, but that's a great example to actually follow. So I'm going to drop some comments in the link in the LinkedIn and the Facebook feed at the end. So free opportunity. Even if you're not a client of mine, doesn't matter. I want to help as many people as I can. So there'll be a free workshop there, free 1 hour webinar. It's likely to be around about 2 o'clock. It's all recorded, all on catch up. If you're coming onto this, by the way, I forgot to mention at the beginning because I got too excited. If you're coming on the replay, put hashtag replay in there, add your comments in, I'll pick them up. And look, folks, all I would say is don't panic. Panic is going to be your ruination. The furlough scheme, even though it's really rubbish in the sense of everybody was geared up today to say, right, this is the new job support scheme. We've done the letters to employees. We've prepared it. We've done our rosters. We factored that in. Suddenly, on the positive side, it's a much more beneficial financial scheme. On the negative side, it's, here we go again. So if you haven't got your letters, you need to go out and do them. Your letters might need to be modified. You still need to comply. You still need to those same conditions. So financially, it's better for you, but please still reflect that in a plan. Still reflect that in a cash flow forecast and reach out and help. Do not suffer in silence. Do not suffer alone. I've nearly lost my ability to speak there. Kate, no problem at all. Yeah, you're quite right there. Implement the extended furlough, and that's an interesting way of putting it, actually. I fully agree with you there. That's my pleasure. So listen, folks, I would just like to say to everybody, enjoying your Sunday evening. I've got another bit of work to do here, and I'm going to hopefully get home to watch the Strictly Comes Dancing. I've got no embarrassment, by the way. I'm also in a very good mood, by the way. It's nothing to do with furlough. I love cats. I love all animals. And one of our cats went missing. And then suddenly last night, it decided to pop its head in and say hello. It'd been missing for about 3 days. We suspect it was locked in somebody's shed, but it came in as though butter wouldn't melt in its mouth. It has that admonishing, disappointed look in its face back again. So that's really good. So anyway, I just went off at a tangent there. Have a fantastic evening. Relax. Stay sanguine. Stay positive. Get a grip with your numbers. Get a grip with your story. And if I can help you in any way, reach out, shout out. Apart from that, everybody, I'm just going to sign off now, and I'll speak to you guys later. So cheerio from me. Take that out of the screen. Let's put a bit of music on. And let's play out. Here we go. A nice bit of upbeat music.